So hello and welcome everyone to this tutorial session. In this video, we will understand how we can use looping statements in Python. So we start off this video by understanding why we require looping statements and how we can use them in Python. Then we will discuss three different types of looping statements that we generally use in Python. So out of those three, first one is the for loop. So we will discuss the syntax and the example of using for loop in Python. After this, we will also understand how we can use while loops, and in the end we will discuss how we can implement nested loops in Python. So without any further delay, let's jump on to our first topic and understand about looping statements. Now there will be many instances when we need to repeat some block of a code in Python multiple times. But as per the best practices that we discussed earlier, we should always write our program in such a way that we should never repeat our code. So there are a variety of programming languages that facilitates the use of loops, or we can say looping statements. Now these loops are set of statements that repeats their execution until the given condition is satisfied, and Python, being a versatile programming language, also allows us to use the looping statements. Now, the main role of looping statements is to change the execution flow of a program. So instead of writing same code again and again, we can utilize loops to repeat that code a limited number of times. For example, we want to print first and prime numbers. Now, without loops, what we can do, we will use the print function and we will print each prime number one by one. Now with loops we can specify certain condition, and based upon that condition we can print out first and prime numbers. So let us understand the execution flow of a looping statement. In loops, the set of statements are executed repeatedly until the given condition is satisfied. However, once the condition is false, the loop will automatically end. So here you can see this flow chart. So whenever we start with a looping statement, it will check certain condition, or we can say it will evaluate certain expression. Now if the condition or the expression is evaluated to be true, then it will repeat the code given in the body of the loop, and then again the condition will be checked again. Now if the condition or the expression evaluated to be false, then in that case the loop will automatically end. Now if I talk about Python, in Python we can use these three different type of looping statement. So first is the for loop, second is the while loop, and third is the nested loop. Now let us start discussing each of these loops in more detail. So we will start with the for loop first. Now for loop are basically widely used looping statements in Python, and the role of a for loop is to iterate across a sequence of items. Now this sequence of items can be a list, tuple, set, dictionary, and even string. Moreover, it will execute the given code in the body of the loop for each item in the sequence. So here we can see the flowchart of this for loop. What it will do, it will iterate through each item given in the sequence. So for example, we have a list having 10 items. So it will iterate through each of the item. Now what will happen when we run the for loop? It will iterate over each item given in the sequence and execute the given set of statements for each of them. Then it will check if the item in the sequence is the last item or not. If the item is last, then it will end the loop, and if the item is not the last item, then it will continue the execution. So here you can see the flowchart for loop. So first what it will do, so it will iterate through the each item given in the sequence. Then as a condition, it will check whether the item in the sequence is the last item or not. If the item is last, then it will end the loop. And if the item is not last, then it will continue executing the code given in the loop. Now to use for loop in Python, we generally use this syntax. So we start off by specifying the for keyword. After this, we specify the looping variable. Now this looping variable is the item. Then we use the in keyword, and then we define any sequence. Now this sequence can be a list, tuple, set, dictionary, or it can even be a string. Now after this statement, we have to define the body of the loop with indentation. Now let's execute certain examples to understand how we can use this syntax in Python. So here you can see certain examples. So we will focus on the first example. In the first example, what we are doing, we have created a list containing certain names, and we have also named this list as names. Now after this we are using the for loop. Now first we specified the for keyword followed by the looping variable. So we have name this looping variable name, then we specify the in keyword, and then we define the sequence. So in this case, the sequence is a list, and in the body of the loop we are using the print function to print a high message for each given name. So when we execute this cell, you can see it will print the high message for each given name. Now just like list, we can also use string as a sequence in our for loop. So here let's look at another example. So here what we are doing, here first we have defined a string variable. Now the value of the string variable is this. Name of the string variable is str. Then we are simply using this for loop where we have defined I as our looping variable, and then we define in keyword, and in the last we define this str. Now what we are doing, we are printing each character given in the string using this print function. So when we execute this cell, you can see each character is printed in the new line. So P comes in the one line, Y comes in the next one, then T comes in the next one. In the same manner, all the characters are coming in the new line. Now after this, let us discuss about one very useful function that which is commonly used in the for loop. The name of this function is the range. This range function is utilized to iterate through a set of code a specified number of times, and it returns the number series starting from 0, and it increases its value by 1 by default until it reaches the specified value. However, we can also specify the starting and the ending of the number series, plus we can also specify the sequence in which we want the number series. So by default the sequence is increment of 1, but we can also change this sequence. Now here on the screen we can see the syntax of the range function. So this range function simply accepts three parameters. First one is the start. Now this parameter is used to specify the starting number of the series. Now by default, if we don't specify start, starting number will be 0. After this, the next parameter is end. So this parameter is used to specify the ending number of the series. Now specifying this character is mandatory. If we don't specify, we cannot use this range function. And in the last, we have step. Now this step parameter is optional to use, but it helps to define the increment in the iteration. So by default the increment in the iteration is 1, but we can also define our own value in step. So let's first discuss a simple example related to range function. Now here you can see we are using a for loop. So for x is our looping variable, and we have specified in keyword, and then we are using this range function, and in this range function we have specified only 5 as an argument. Now when we specify only one argument, it will be taken as the end parameter. So our start is by default 0 and our end will be defined as 5, and again the value of step parameter will be automatically 1, and then we are simply printing out each number in the given range using this print function. So if I execute this cell, you can see it starts from 0, then 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Now here it simply means that when we define the ending number of our range, then that number is excluded from the sequence. Now if I want 5, then I have to define the end as 6 and then execute. Now here you can see the number series 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 5 is there. Now let's discuss one more example. So what we are doing in this code, we are taking maximum range as an input from the user. Now this range will be our ending in the range function. So after taking the input, we are iterating through the given range, and we are simply returning all the even numbers. So if I execute this code, you can see it is asking for enter the maximum range. Now if I define my maximum range as 10, then it will print out all the even numbers starting from 2 to 10. So these are the even numbers present in the range 2 to 10. Now this time 10 is included. So here in the loop we have defined num plus 1. That's why this value is included. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 is the output. Now if you guys remember, we have discussed in our previous sessions how we can use the else block with the if statement. Now we can also use else block with the for loop, and that else block will be executed whenever the for loop ends. So let me show you an example related to this implementation. So this is the example. In this example, first we are taking a number as an input from the user and we are storing it in the num variable. Then we are using a for loop, and this for loop is going from 1 to 11, and it is simply printing out the product of the num variable and the looping variable x. And after this we are using this else block, and in the else block we are using print function to print finished as a string. So what this simple program will do, it will take any number as input from the user, and it will return the multiplication table for that number going from 1 to 10, and in the last it will return finished once this multiplication table is ended. So let me execute this cell. Now let me give input as 12 and hit enter, and it will print out the complete multiplication table of 12 starting from 1 to 10. In the last we can see once the loop ends, it has printed this finished string which was there in the else block. I hope we all understood how to use for loops in Python. After for loop, let's discuss how we can use while loop in Python. Now while loop is another looping statement available in Python, and its role is to simply execute the given set of statement repeatedly till the given condition evaluates to be true, and the loop will end automatically once the condition evaluates to be false. So here we can see the working of the while loop. So once we define our while loop, we define an expression with it, or we can say we need to define certain condition with it. Now when we run the while loop, it will evaluate that expression or condition. If the condition is true, then the body of the while loop will be executed and it will continue evaluating the expression. Now if the evaluation comes out to be false, then the loop will end. Now here is the syntax that we generally use to execute while loop in Python. So first we define this while keyword. Followed by this, we need to define the expression or the condition, and then we need to define the body of the while loop with indentation. Now let us discuss some examples related to while loop. So let's discuss this first example. Now what we are doing in this example, we are taking integer value as an input from the user, and we will calculate the factorial of that number. So for this task, what we are doing, we are using the input function. We are taking integer type value as input from the user, and we are storing it in the num variable. After this, we are initializing another variable result, and we have set its value to 1. After this, we are using this while loop, and in the while loop, we have defined this expression num is greater than 0. Now till num is greater than 0, the code given in the body of the while loop will be executed. Now what is this code in the while loop? So what we are doing, we are calculating the product of a result and num, and we are storing it back to the result variable. And after this, we are decreasing the value of num by 1. So in the while loop, what we are doing, we are calculating the product of a result and num variable, and we are storing it back in the result variable. Now initially we define the value of result as 1. Now when we run the program, for example, we have given this input as 6. So the value of num will be 6. Then the value of result variable will become 6, and after calculating the result, the value of num will be decreased by 1 value. So if we define 6 initially as our input, then after the first iteration, it will become 5 and the value of result will become 6. So 6 into 5 will become 30 and the value of result will become 30, and for the next iteration, the result will be 30 and the num value will be 4. Then again we calculate its product and its product comes out to be 120. So in the next iteration, value of result will be 120 and the value of num will become 3. So if we calculate their product, it comes out to be 360. So for the next iteration, the value of result will be 360 and the value of num will become 2. So then the value of result variable will become 720. And for the last iteration, the value of result variable will be 720 and the value of num will be 1. So their product will be 720. Now after this iteration, the value of num will become 0, and we have specified this condition that the num value should be always greater than 0, only then the body of the while loop will be executed. Once the value of num reaches 0, the loop will automatically end, and then in last this print function will be executed. So factorial of the given number, and it will return the result. So let me execute this cell. Now let me put 6 as my input as we discussed, and if I hit enter, you can see this factorial of given number is 720. Now, just like we were using else block with the for loop, in the same manner we can use else block with the while loop as well. So let us discuss a simple example related to that also. Let's see this second example. In this example, first we are taking an integer value as input from the user and we are storing it in the num variable. Then we are defining our while loop, and this time the condition in the while loop is num should be less than 10. And in the body of the while loop, what we are doing, we are printing this up, the value of num is less than 10, and then we are printing the value of num. Then what we are doing, we are incrementing the value of num by 1. So here we are using this assignment operator. This assignment operator will be something like this: num equal to num plus 1. And after the while loop, we have defined this else block. So in the else block, we are printing this up. We are using the print function to print this string value of num is no longer less than 10. So let me execute this cell. So first we have to provide some input. So let me provide 5 as my input and hit enter. So you can see initially the value of num is less than 10. It was 5. It goes until 9. Once the value of num reaches 10, it has printed this out. The value of num is no longer less than 10. Now let's move to our next topic and discuss about nested loops in Python. Now the third category of looping statement in Python is the nested loops, and it includes using one or more loops within another loop. So for example, using for loop within a while loop, or while loop within a for loop, or we can say we want to use two for loops within one another for loop. So that will be nesting, and the loops will be known as nested loop. So if we talk about execution, the syntax of nested loops will look something like this. So first we define our for loop where we are iterating through a sequence, and then within the body of the for loop we have defined another for loop which is iterating through some other sequence, and then we are defining the body for this second loop. So we can say this first loop is the outer loop, and the loop which is inside the outer loop is the inner loop. Now to understand this concept better, let's implement an example in Python. So here is our example. In this example, what we are doing, we are going to print the right side triangle using stars. First, what we are doing, we are taking number of rows as input from the user. So this number of rows will be the number of rows in the triangle. Then what we are doing, we are using the nested for loop. So first we define the outer loop, which is used to represent the number of rows in the triangle. After this, within the for loop, we are using another for loop. This could be considered as our inner loop, and this loop will help us to represent the number of columns. And then in the body of the inner loop, we are using print function to print star character. And then outside this inner loop and within the outer loop, we are using this empty print function. Now the role of this empty print function is to print the ending line after each row. So let us execute this code. So first we need to enter the number of rows. So let me enter 4 as the number of rows and hit enter. So here you can see it has printed out a right angle triangle with 4 rows. So with this we have come to the end of this tutorial session. In the next one we will discuss how to use jump statements in our loops. So thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.